That's okay.
I was hoping to say that.
All right. Well, Berge Wind Power is one of the companies that I do represent. They've been in business since roughly 1978. When I first picked them, I considered them one of the leaders in small wind because of their longevity and their success of installations all over the world. I went to some factory training down in Oklahoma, and we were going to do some more training with them for some remote installations. Like I mentioned here, this just kind of goes down through their lists of qualifications as far as them being the leader in the small wind. Mike Berge, one of the owners of the company, was very instrumental in getting a lot of the federal tax credits and the incentives passed in Washington. He's been down there many times to speak in front of the different people in Washington. Their installations are worldwide. You know, some people will say, well, do they bother this type of equipment or that type of equipment? Are they? And the government has used them for sensitive military installations to power those installations. They're pretty much all over the world. These units are 10 kW. That's a pretty good size in comparison to even the 1 kW down below it there. The 10 kW at full power, running continuously, usually makes more than most people use in their home for electricity. And when the wind's blowing, that's where you get into your net metering and stuff. The net metering aspect of it, go ahead.
What's the cost for one of those installed?
We're getting right to it, aren't we? What's the cost? That unit itself, by itself, not installed, is $40,000 with the tower, a 100-foot tower. And then the installation costs can vary pretty widely, but you know, anywhere from another 15 to 25. If you start getting into other towers, you can get into $80,000 installed.
Probably more commercial use than residential.
This, no, I would consider this more of a residential unit.
That price.
Yeah, yeah. The funny thing is, you know, not everybody falls into this category, but most people every 3 or 4 years buy a new car, and after 5 years, you're lucky if you get a quarter of the value of that car when you go to trade it in. This is going to make electricity for you for over 20 years. Berge's had these installed for over 22 years at some locations before they had to take them down just to do motor bearing replacements and stuff. So it's something I look at as an absolute long-term investment in your residence. I don't think it's something you'd want to do for a house you're going to flip in 4 or 5 years or something like that. It's just, it's kind of like remodeling a kitchen where you'll get some of the money back in talking to realtors, but you're not going to get all of it back. And really where you realize the savings with owning one of these or installing one of them is in the longevity of having it, not in the first 4 or 5 years.
Say you put an inverter, there's an inverter set the cost on $40,000.
We'll go down through this, and I think I'll have that. But the inverter is separate. And that has its advantages and disadvantages. But, you know, back in the late 70s, early 80s, the whole country was worried about energy, as we are now, because we had the energy crisis of the late 70s. A lot of companies came and went, and Berge's one of the few that's probably out of, I think they said 48. There's 3 that are still in business today. And again, they really feel like the product they put out is reliable, and it's been proven over time that it's going to work. You know, this ruggedness and reliability that they talk about is one of the things that drew me to them. I wanted a product when I was choosing a wind generator that has been out there a while and has proven itself. There's a lot of companies out there that are prototypes, probably more than the 48 I mentioned from the late 70s, early 80s. And I've seen appliances before come out as prototypes, and the nightmares they create for people who are selling them as far as service and reliability. So I didn't want a product that was kind of in a prototype stage, or even something with less than 4 or 5 years running time successfully. A lot of turbines have been out there for 4 or 5 years, and every year they're doing things to change them to get them to run right, and they still haven't, what I would say, nailed it as far as being able to say that you just plug them in and they go, like Berge has. You know, the attraction to these is the simplicity of them. It's just 3 moving parts. Obviously the rotor with the blades and the alternator inside, and the tail fin itself. The Berge protects itself in high wind situations by the amount of force on the tail, and as you get over 38 to 40 mile an hour wind, the tail actually starts to move, and it'll actually line up with the blades and turn the whole unit sideways to protect it. Or you can do it mechanically from the base of the tower with a boat winch and a cable that runs up to through the center of the tower to a hinge point right here.
So it essentially shuts down.
Yes,
Perfectly.
yes, that's right. Goes into the wind like a sailboat heading upwind. This is just an installation picture of a ARE, Abundant Renewable Energy, on a self-supporting lattice tower. This is opportunity really to talk about the different types of towers. There's this one, obviously the self-supporting lattice tower. It's kind of middle of the road. You know, a 100-foot tower like that probably costs about $14,000.
Is it guide?
It's self-supporting, no guy wires. 100-foot tower, for the same thing for the Berge with guy wires. Those are running around $11,000. Here's a guide lattice tower with a Berge on top. As they go up in height, you add more guy wires. This was at the training school out in Oklahoma that have multiple units on site, and you can see the tail boom furrowed over in that picture. And while you're up in the tower, people are working up there, that's just what you do. You furl that over, stay sideways in the wind, and then electrically you short out the 3 phases, and that pretty much locks the rotor. Not 100%, but it does help keeping it from turning. This is a pole tower with, I think that's an ARE turbine on it. This is a tilt-up style. It actually has this boom out here with a pivot point that you can attach a winch or a tractor to, raise and lower that. You have to have 4 guy wires for a tilt-up tower, as opposed to 3 on a tower that doesn't go up and down.
So it's got a hinge plate on the base. It's got a hinge plate on the base of it to mount the...
Yeah, it has to have some type of hinge at the base. This is just an old style windmill. It's an example of a 10 kW down on Martha's Vineyard on a self-supporting lattice tower. The nice thing about the lattice towers is it does let you leave more tree growth around the tower. Tower with guy wires, you want to protect the guy wires from trees falling as much as the tower. Typically on an installation with guy wires, you're looking at almost 150 to 200 foot radius around the base, where you really don't want any trees of size because of the damage that they potentially could cause. So you clear and open a pretty big area.
What's the construction procedure with one of those where it doesn't tilt up? You just start at the base and just keep adding on to it?
You erect it horizontally on the ground, all just loose, finger tight, all the nuts and bolts, and there's thousands of them. And you put the head on, and then you raise it up with a crane, and what they do is they say you shake it out. Hopefully it finds its center, and then 2 guys go down through. It takes over a day to tighten everything up and torque it to specifications. But that's pretty labor intensive.
This is on Martha's Vineyard. I suspect that it's either a popular idea or they have problems getting the neighbors to like this. Is that an issue at all?
With permitting, are you asking me with permitting which is easier? I'm not sure.
Did this particular installation have an issue with putting a wind tower with their neighbors or with someone?
I haven't run into any. Each site is unique in its own way, and sometimes real estate can be an issue. In other words, a lot of towns now, and this is some guidelines the state came up with, they want the tower height to be, say if it's 100 feet, they want the base to be 110 feet from the closest residence or property line even. So they call that the 110%.
You know,
Wes?
anything about wasn't there just a wind regulation passed in the state? Something to do with,
House Bill 310, right.
yeah,
But the local town governments can't prohibit you from installing one as a resident, but they can put limitations and restrictions on them. That could be anything from tower height to setbacks to size to noise, quantity.
has this been an issue or a positive thing for you either way?
I think it's a positive thing, making awareness, getting awareness out there. One of the installs I'm doing right now, a neighbor's taking the town to court because he didn't have his day to voice his concerns, I guess.
And what are his concerns, do you know?
Devaluation of his property next to his neighbor's. And the noise, even though he doesn't live on that lot, he didn't get his day in court, if you will, I think is his biggest. In that town, it's a small town up in northern New Hampshire, they don't even have zoning laws, you know, they've done 2 or 3 building permits prior to this one, so when this homeowner came in to get a building permit, they gave it to him, you know. So,
Very interested in small town politics, isn't it?
you know, some people think they're good. I'm necessarily not in agreement with that as time goes on. You know, having a standardized way to do things and, if you will, letting people voice their concerns at a hearing. It doesn't mean the board's going to be swayed by their concerns, but at least it gives them an opportunity to be heard.
Get some answers to their concerns.
What's that?
And get the facts regarding their concerns.
Right.
Have the information.
Right.
provided So they're not sitting there in their yard with animosity, watching something that they really feel emotional about happening regardless.
You know, it's one of these things, it's second home even for this particular man, and, you know, he comes up to enjoy the foliage, and his neighbor's got construction going on his property, and being the nosy neighbor, he stops and says, "What are you doing?" And, you know, to his dismay, they were putting up a wind generator. So, I mean,
Do you encourage the homeowners to contact their neighbors?
I encourage the homeowners to talk to all their neighbors before they go apply for a permit, and typically, most of your neighbors aren't going to have a concern. Most of the hearings we've been to, there might be one family that shows up or none. You know,
Dave, what's the possibility of neighbors going in on a single windmill? Is there a way to, you know, that might help ease some of the tensions if you're a neighbor?
I guess it's possible. The problem with the program, the way the state has it set up with net metering, it all goes through one meter. And that's the way these generators are set up to run. So if you have if you're sharing electricity now, it would be fairly easy to do, but to set up everybody's infrastructure to come out in through one meter, I mean, it can be done, but it's not typically the way most residential neighborhoods are built today. You know, it's certainly something that's becoming talked about more and more, I know, is sharing, whether it's heating systems or utilities within a neighborhood.
I know they're doing that some cluster developments now where they're having shared energy systems.
Right, whether it's a solar panel or with hot water or even the heating systems now, they're getting back to doing some type of biomass or some other renewable energy resource where they can just pipe it to homes instead of everybody having a boiler.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
I have another question about the construction of the tower. Is that on a pad of a specific size, and then how do you level it? Just with screws, with, you know, balance?
On a monopole tower?
No, with one of these,
Self-supporting lattice?
lattice, yes. Is there any issue with giving them?
You know, some of the techniques you use sometimes are pretty elementary. You know, if it's not a windy day, you could use a plumb bob, not very accurate, but it is pretty accurate, especially with a tapered structure like that. The other thing is you can use a transit with a vertical axis. So you could center it on the base and then run it up from a couple different angles.
Is pinned to a concrete base?
These self-supporting ones are. The lattice type towers with the guy wires I showed you earlier, those are just, there's a pin in the base and it floats on that pin. There's a base plate at the bottom. It's not bolted at all. Where it's bolted down to the ground is through the guy wires. That's where all the force is created at and how they hold them down to the ground is through the guy wires. So they tried anchoring the bases themselves and they were having problems with the concrete failing, basically exploding because of the forces and the vibrations and stuff, so they found it's better to leave that floating. This is the Bergies.
And how do they maintain that knife to the ground while they're putting the guys in?
It's pretty tricky.
I bet it,
It's pretty tricky. You know, what you're looking for is a level base, and you try to keep that whole base plate basically in contact, so you're not pulling up one side or the other. And then, like I said, doing a vertical axis check, whether it's with the string and a plumb bob or transit. They're all pretty accurate. The biggest thing with the guy wires is setting your tension, and they use a technique by setting up a resonance in the guy wires and then counting the beats within a certain time frame.
interesting.
Yeah, depending on the height of the tower, the length of the guy wire, there's some math you do, and you get it shaking, and then one guy's counting the beats and the other guy's got a stopwatch. And you've got a certain amount of time to get a certain amount of beats, or you need to tighten it or loosen it if there's too many.
Like tuning a guitar. Like tuning a guitar.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like tuning two engines in a boat
Yeah,
that are, when you got a twin engine boat, it's exactly the same thing you do. You end up hearing the
harmonic,
harmonics, absolutely.
yeah. It's very effective, though. I mean, if it's too loose, you definitely don't get your counts in the time frame, and you got to tighten it up a little bit and get it right. After they set for about a month, usually you go back and check them, and you have to do adjustments at times. Go ahead.
So this is the 10 kW we're looking at here. What's the area swept by the blades?
22 feet.
22 feet.
Yeah.
That's the
That's-
diameter. That's the diameter?
Mm-hmm.
It's 22 feet?
That's a 1,200-pound machine.
And you say it goes to winds of up to 40 miles an hour?
Right.
What level does it kick in?
Around 7 to 8.
8 miles an hour?
Is
Yeah.
the startup, Steve? That's the startup?
Mm-hmm.
What's the cut-in?
Right around that. I'm sorry. That's about one and the same.
So it starts producing at 8.
Yes.
And at 8 miles an hour, what fraction of the potential are you going to get?
About 10, well, it's about half a kilowatt. 0.5, around 10 amps. Not 10, I'm sorry, 2.
2 kilowatts?
No, 2 amps
2 amps.
output at a half a kW. 2 point something.
Okay, thanks.
So this is the largest one that I currently represent. Supposedly, Berkey's going to come out with a 5 kW for about 30% less. I'm anxious to see that one because I feel like it's a better residential overall. This one is for residential users who are using 1,000 to 1,500 kilowatt hours a month. The 5 kW will get us down to that 500 to 800 range, where I think most people are at. The other company I represent is Southwest Wind Power. They have a 1.8 kW that's, can make anywhere from nothing to upwards of 400 or 500 kilowatt hours in a real good site.
Is that the 3.7?
Yes. And the 3.7, the SkyStream 3.7 is a 1.8 kW unit that has a 11-foot rotor diameter. They're both three-bladed, pultruded or some type of polymer fiberglass combination. What?
The Bergie upwind or downwind?
They're wind leading, so it's downwind. It doesn't follow the wind. The tail puts it so it comes across the nose, and the sky stream follows the wind, where it comes across the body and then into the blades. It's just the opposite because of the blade. Now, the Skystream's got a great product. They're marketing it heavily, had a lot of good press release. I've been to their training, and I'm hopeful that they'll get some of the issues that they have with their units worked out. They do have issues with them, though. And they're actively pursuing solutions for them. They had factory technicians at one of my installs this week repairing the units. They actually took them down and stuff, and they're paying the homeowners for shutting them down, which I thought was real good.
I mentioned to you that I have a student who has installed one, in case you didn't guess.
Right, yeah. So it's been working for you pretty good?
Knock wood, it's been working since the beginning of this month when we finally got to upgrade the inverter and the communications. But it was down it came with a real bad wiring issue, which they treated as though it just needed an inverter. We installed it for a homeowner, and they really didn't respond very expeditiously to our concerns. Despite knowing that my husband had received quite a shock from the tower itself, the day of installation. Got the inverter replacement, and that's when our electrician discovered this significant wiring, basically reversal of wiring into the nacelle, and replaced the inverter. I'm not sure if we ended up replacing the inverter or whether we just reinstalled the one that had been in there because the wiring was the issue, not the nacelle. But that failed within a couple of weeks. After that, it kept applying the brake like it was in high winds.
Mm-hmm.
And so we shut it down, and they finally got the new inverter communications upgrade to us sometime in September. September, I think it was.
Every site's unique, but one of the things I like to talk to people about, and the reason I'm mentioning this is sells a 30-foot tower. And I typically talk about towers initially to people that are smaller than 80 feet, 65 feet type of thing. And a lot of them have already educated themselves on Southwest Wind Power's website and know that those other towers are out there, but I really feel like there's so much turbulence at ground level, and if you're fairly close to your house, one of the rules that I've heard and seen is the 30 feet above anything within 300 feet. And you can situate yourself in such a way that the prevailing winds, it might be a good location, but the other, 85% of the time the winds in New Hampshire come from your north-northwest, but the 15% of the other time, sometimes I've had to sacrifice because people don't want big towers and their building is in the way of making electricity on those days when it does come from those directions. Other installers also like to quote the smaller towers because obviously it looks like a more attractive package money-wise, but I really think, putting them on too short a tower is like putting solar panels in the shade. You might as well just, buy a little whirligig and put it on your lawn and save yourself thousands of dollars because you're not going to make the electricity that you want to with the investment of money that you've made. Go ahead.
Don't you think with the Who Southwest to publish that a little more clearly?
The short towers?
Yeah.
They promote selling them. I mean, it's just a difference in philosophy that I don't agree with. I mean, I've seen wind generators on the ocean. These are Bergies out in the middle of the ocean, and they always seems like the minimum tower they have is 80 feet. And even like out at the Isles of Shoals, where the University of New Hampshire has one at a research center, it's on an 80 or 100-foot tower. And it's the rocks there are only 20 feet high, and then it's up on the island there.
But doesn't that, that increases the cost significantly because your conduit is a big part of the investment.
The conduit?
The wire going from
Right.
Get to your meter, wherever that is, and, you know,
Yeah.
and it's priced out by distance, so.
You know, it comes down to even, you know, say you're building a new home, and do you want a 100 amp panel in your home or a 200 amp panel? Those are the choices you're making, I think, that are similar with the wind generator. Putting it on too short a tower in the right location, you're not going to get the same performance. Every 10 feet you go up, you gain 7% more wind availability. So there's a big difference between 60 feet and 100 feet. What
But
time?
is 60 feet an indicator of what you're gonna get at 100 feet?
Absolutely.
In other words, if I put an anemometer on top of my house, I can, what's the word I'm looking for?
Extrapolate.
Extrapolate, thank you. When it'll be 100 feet up?
I think if you have the right anemometer, you could do that.
Well, that
The
leaves-
problem is a lot of the residential anemometers are 30 to 40% inaccurate.
Well, that leads me to my next question. I'm Joe homeowner. I'm not quick to spend money, but if you show me that it's gonna be a good thing for me, I might just do it. So what do you suggest?
The process I go through with like inquiries and stuff is I'll take and ask them where they live and of course how much electricity they're looking to make, some basic questions. There's a web service I use called First Look Wind Speed, and you can put in either geographic coordinates or 911 addresses, and just like Google Earth, it goes right to that location.
First look or first look?
Look.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they do wind and solar. And what that does without spending any money is I get an annual average wind speed at 3 tower heights, 20 meter, 60 meter, and I think an 80 meter. And I'll look at those 3 heights. Usually I just look at the bottom 2 at that location, and if they're somewhere between 10 and above at the lower 2 tower heights, it's at least worth investigating.
And what would a typical investigation?
For me, it's driving to their house, looking at the site. A lot of times on that Google Earth too, you can look or the service I use, you can look and you can see, wow, they're at the south end of a 100-acre field or something like that on this side of the hill. So it's a real good tool for me to help establish with people at least a baseline.
And what is that minimum wind speed average that we look for typically?
An annual average, I would consider, you know, at the lower tower height, 10 is a very minimum, and at the upper tower height, I like to see it above 13. So that 10 to 13. Now, if I check somebody's site out in the lower tower heights at 12 and the upper one's at 15, that's almost for sure a pretty good wind site.
Now, do you...
They might have to clear some land if they're in a heavily forested lot to get that 30, 300 type of thing. But most people who are serious about doing this are willing to do that. And the other benefit is if they heat with wood, they also get a couple years worth of wood out of it. Go ahead.
How far away do you need to be from homes so that you don't have noise pollution?
Boy, pretty much anywhere you run a wire to within 600 feet, on a real windy day, you'll be able to hear it.
Yeah.
In the house with the windows closed, you could be as close as 150, 100 feet, and you're not going to hear it.
Yeah.
Once you step outside, you know, on a windy day, you can hear the wind, and it's just a little bit different. It's not overpowering the wind with noise or anything.
It's not a disturbing noise.
The sky streams make a funny noise. They have an electronic, I think, noise from the inverter that changes with the speed of the blades. It's different than an air noise. And if you have one, you know what I'm talking about, probably.
Yeah, but it's a different perspective too. For us, where it doesn't function well, we love that noise.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But you know, I think it's important.
It's not like, oh my God,
No.
at all. It's working.
Well, I think it's important for people to hear it. Whether it's a Bergy, a Skystream, ARE, they need to hear what it sounds like. And that's the other thing in trying to educate planning boards or zoning boards and stuff, is I encourage them to go out, come visit one with me. so you can hear it and see what it sounds like. It's hard to conceptualize that noise without actually walking up to one. What?
Do you have one?
I do. I have a Bergie.
Kilowatt?
Huh?
10 kilowatt?
Yes. Yeah.
What size is your tower?
100 feet. 100 feet. And I put it about 300 feet from my home, because in that 300 feet, I also gained another 65 feet in elevation. So to me, it was worth going up a little bit higher, but I don't know. It's been awful nice this fall. It hasn't worked as well as I'd hoped.
So you've got Joe homeowner, you've checked out his site on the web.
And now we're going to his site.
Now you go to his site. Well, one of the things I'm just picking up on is you said something about the average anemometer is plus or minus 30%.
Pretty inaccurate.
So what do? Is there a specific one that's more accurate? How do you
The anemometer thing is pretty tough. You know, you can go out and, say as a homeowner, you say to me, well, I want you to put an anemometer up and monitor my site for a year. How much is it going to cost me? You know, I've done it, pricing it. I haven't put one up. It's close to $3,000 to monitor a site for a year.
What's the expense? The initial cost of the anemometer or the?
Putting the equipment up. You know, it takes 3 guys, a good solid day with a 100-foot tower to assemble everything.
I see. So
The equipment I look at more as,
that goes back to my question, which is you can't put it on top of the house. You've got to get it up 100 feet.
pretty much where you're operating at because of the turbulence at ground level. I mean, I installed one wind generator at a location in Springfield, and the guy's like, oh, I've been monitoring my wind speed at ground level for 3 years, and it's always 4 miles an hour or better. So he did the math and figured up at 65 feet he'd have a good site. And I said, I know you have a good site because of where you are and the way things look, I said, but if you were basing it just on that, is how accurate is your instrument? You see what I'm trying to say? So the other thing you can do when you get to a site is look around at the trees that are there. Hopefully they have some older, bigger trees, and like these big 100-foot pines and stuff. A lot of times the top 20 or 30 feet, because it's up in the wind, it gets a downwind growth, a heavy downwind growth, visibly.
You all understand what he's talking about? Flagging of trees?
Flagging, that's
The place where it's classic, if you've ever been to Parker River, Plum Island, down there, and you drive down, or on Mount Washington, and you just see the flagging of all
Or
the...
if you hike and stuff, you start getting up around tree level, you'll see a lot of the small trees even just are growing on one side.
Now, if you're getting to this later, please cut me off, but there's been a lot of questions lately about horizontal versus vertical wind installations.
I don't have anything I was going to talk about that. All I can say is like in the beginning, I was really looking for products that have been out there and tested and reliable. And I think I found that with Bergie, and hopefully Southwest is going to be there. They're going through growing pains. I think what happened with Southwest Wind Power, I think, is they had a great marketing team. Great marketing team.
And it appeared pretty good.
And their technical and support staff wasn't at the speed that marketing was ramping them up to. Basically they couldn't handle the leads and inquiries. And that's pretty common right now with all the alternative energy companies. I also sell wood gasification boilers, outdoor and indoor, and their business is quintupled. So they have more in sales than they can produce, and they're having a tough time struggling, growing at that rate.
So that said, and do you have any advice for these people who are interested in careers in this area? As far as, does that imply, for example, a need in one particular area or another?
Obviously not the toughest, but one of the most important things is to align yourself with a reputable company. If you're going to work for somebody else or on your own, choosing the right distributor to work with is critical. I've dropped 2 distributors this year, and I just started my business this year. Communication's so important, and if you're not getting it from them, you know, you're behind the 8 ball before you make your first sale. Because people are going to ask you questions about things you don't know, you don't have the expertise or the longevity in the business to always answer them, and when you can't get the help from the companies you're repping, you're in tough shape. It doesn't tend to make you look favorable to the customer.
You did train with Southwest, but that's specific for the SkyStream, or did you also train for the Whispers and the Airstreams and the other things they manufacture, and do you have any knowledge about the performance of those units?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to ask that again. That was a big question for me.
Southwest Wind Power.
Yes.
That's the SkyStream, that's their newest thing.
Right.
They actually bought an outfit that was around back in the 80s, that
Mm-hmm.
we actually have a turbine from called the Whisper.
Right,
I believe
right.
They have 3 Whisper models that they produce and sell, and then they have a number, I'm not sure how many, called Airstream, which are more, as I recall, for marine use, but they're a smaller unit. When you received your training, was it specific to the SkyStream?
No, they gave us a little bit of knowledge about some of the other products. The other products that she's mentioning are all DC battery charging ones. And I haven't had too many inquiries where people were interested in that. Most people want to use their existing electricity. And I can speak from personal experience. You know, 8 years ago when I first started thinking about wind, I didn't want 4 or 5 dozen batteries to be maintaining. And I think that's one of the reasons we're getting some popularity growth is because they have these net metering grid interconnect systems that don't require the batteries. Of course, they don't work either when you lose power from the street. That's an important thing to note, unless you have a backup generator. And then what it needs is it needs to sense AC power to work. And I've said that in the past with the generators, but you still have an issue of where to put the power you're not using. So you really, when you don't have AC power from the street, they don't work, because you don't have batteries to charge type of thing, so they're pretty much offline.
You can't add batteries into the line, can't you? Is my understanding that you...
You sure can. You can do, you know, get another inverter,
Right.
and you have to change it back to DC. Every time you change that electricity, you're losing some efficiency with it too. But so we talked about the sighting and the, you know, the performance on these things. They're pretty well tested, especially the Berge and the SkyStream. And if you're getting the wind that you say according to the performance, that's pretty much accurate. In other words, they'll get installations and people say, well, I'm not making as much power as I thought I was going to, and it's probably because they overestimated how much annual wind speed they did have. So it's real important. You know, there's a lot of good sites in New Hampshire to put wind in, and there's a lot of okay sites, and then there's some sites it's windy a little bit, but not that good. And I'm really trying to strive to find successful sites with successful product and put them together. I have situations where I could just sell units, and I'm not interested in doing that to homeowners. So.
Have you ever run into a situation where you had a good, where you were part of a hybrid installation? In other words, a lot of places you find you got good wind in the winter and good sun in the summer, and so there's some people are combining them. I haven't been involved with that yet, but people are definitely combining them, especially if they want to be more or less self-sufficient, because you're not always, even if you go solar, you're not always going to have sunny days, enough of them for your batteries to last long enough. And the same thing with wind, you're not always going to have a windy day. Do you do any off-grid systems?
I have not.
You have not?
No.
Interesting.
Well, more and more people are looking at that, though. I do get inquiries from people looking at land, and they'll want to know, do you think this is a good wind site? So, and it's something easy I can do if they give me the GPS coordinates, looking it up on the computer while we're talking on the phone. You know, it takes 5 minutes, and if it's, like, again, if it's something that looks good, then it's worth taking an hour or 2 out of my day to go make a sales call and pursue it further, basically. But go ahead.
What about solar and a solar net metered situation where the wind turbine is net metered?
You can do that. You can do that.
But you don't hear of it much?
And the solar net metering also is, you know, something new, but they're being able to do solar now without batteries. Again, because a lot of people just don't want the batteries in their homes or in a shed that they got to worry about the maintenance on them.
And the expense?
There's been net metering for, I think, 6 years, but last year, some legislation raised the maximums that you're allowed to net meter, so that what Dave is saying is now more practical for people than it was with the lower ones.
Right, right. On a 10 kW Berge, to put batteries with that system adds almost $15,000 to the cost. You know, it's significant. Go ahead.
Do you find that when you go on a call that people have an idea of what these costs are going to be?
I mentioned it on the phone,
Okay.
and the rebates and stuff, and kind of, you know,
Is it still?
prepare them, I guess is a good way to put it, you know. And like I mentioned earlier about the cars or boats or whatever, you know, people make big investments in other things that are kind of almost recreational or disposable. And to put this in light of what they cost, I try to use some type of comparison.
Do you have any case studies that show, for example, you know, I'm interested in Joe homeowner, or is it Joe plumber, excuse me, whatever, you know, comes out, he's got a 10-mile-an-hour wind speed, 10, 12 miles an hour. He's going to invest 80 grand and get 10 back in incentives. What's 70 grand going to make his energy picture look like? You know, I mean, how long is it going to take him the proverbial payback, or you know, what's
In his lifetime.
Huh?
In his lifetime.
In his lifetime. You're
It can be anywhere from, you know, as low as probably 12 upwards of 20 plus.
years.
Yeah, yeah. That's using today's rates.
Do you think the incentives, obviously they haven't kicked in yet, so it's hard to tell, but do you think that's enough to make people incentivize them, whatever the word is?
I think it'll do that for some people. The biggest thing is when they go to jump in, they don't buy a SkyStream on a 30-foot tower and think they're going to get all their electricity replaced by that. You know, or a 10 kW Berge on a bad location, and you know, expect all their electricity to be paid for. It's a tough call. What I was going to say earlier about also, and I forgot, was with the meteorological monitoring, it's just like, wind is just like the rain and snow. Some years we have rainy years, some years we don't. We have droughts. And it's the same with wind. Some years you have windy years, some years you don't. You can give me $3,000 to monitor your site, but it might be an off year one way or the other. And you're going to base some, you know, decision on that. It's obviously better than doing nothing.
But your experience is, you know before you install it how order of magnitude how good the site is, with or without that.
I think so.
And have you had any surprises, personal surprises, where you put something in and it really performs worse than you expected? Or
Other than my own, no.
other than your own? And your own went which way? You thought it would do?
I've only had it up a month.
Okay.
And this past month, the weather's been beautiful. That's all I can say.
But generally, you put it up, if you put it up and you've done your own research, it's going to perform.
They are, yes. Yep.
So I don't mean to press you because you weren't involved in this, but we talked on the phone about the Mass Collaborative Technology Collaborative meeting where they were underperforming. What's your assessment on why that's?
Almost 2 dozen units were installed, I think, that they monitored, and almost all of them were underperforming. And I asked Mike Berge, the owner of Berge Wind Power, the same question, and he says, you know, mechanically, electrically, these units will do what they say they will. If you overestimate their performance or poorly site them, that's typically the problem.
So you think that's what's gone on here, it's been poor sighting?
I mean, I think part of it, they were all on good towers though, just about, I think 95% of them, there was only like one 60-footer tower, the rest were 80 to 120. I mean, it certainly was a little unnerving, seeing that report right when I was starting my company up. You know, that's basically saying it's not going to work.
No, well, I get where I'm going with this is that I don't want to see it say that.
Me neither.
The technology's proven, there's nothing particularly experimental about it. You know the size of the blade, you know the performance and tested. So it's really about educating people and having ethical installers that are installing them in places where they're going to work, which is, I've been leading you in this direction in case you haven't noticed. But that seems to me, unless I'm missing something, that's the key to success, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. That's all right, it was over.
It's
Yeah,
over.
I'm done.
OVA.
Yeah.
Well, do I have to switch this on?
So you're saying 8 to 15 mile an hour range?
Anything above 10 with an annual average is at least worth looking at to see if it is also contributed by some topographical trees and stuff like that. Looking at the actual location, how open is it? Those are important too. But you know, just on the phone, if somebody's talking to me and I see that lower number below 10, I'd tell them, you know, I'll come out and look at it, but it doesn't look like it's too viable. Maybe in a few years, technology improved such that it will be a good site then. But with today's generators that are out there and stuff, it's too expensive to do just for a little bit of electricity.
Dave,
Yes.
how much land do you need to clear for the matrix installed without the guy in the driveway?
You don't have to unplug it.
It depends on how big a tower you have. 100-footer, you know, you're looking at probably an acre and a half. If it's already open, you know, you just want to be 30 feet above anything within 300 feet. With that being said, you know, you could be on top of a mountain, like I was saying earlier, and it's bald, and then behind where you want to put it, there might be some trees or something. When I say behind, I mean from the north-northwest direction, so south of where you're going to put it. And you really should take those trees into consideration. Yeah.
I just want to add, if you do that and it's in current use, you want to go to your town and find out what the impact's going to be on your current use situation. It's one of the things our homeowner had slapped her pretty hard. And I feel like I need to explain that our site is it's a 30-foot tower, but it's quite a bit of elevation. It's on a hill above the home.
So you have a 30-foot tower?
Yes, we do. But it's above the home, and it's specifically for her art studio to amortize the cost of her electric kiln and using her studio. So she's got 400 kilowatt hours, which is what that Skystream was rated for monthly, would totally meet her need if it performs as it's rated to, which is why we went.
No, I think you're saying it wrong. It will perform at that wind speed, at that output. It's, do you have that wind speed at that location?
Pretty significant. As long as there's a wind, it's typically enough to generate.
Right. That's a lot of electricity for a Skystream.
Well, that's what's, if you look at the information, which I'm sure you have, that's what they tell people that it's going to do for them. It's for her.
Whether it's Skystream, Berge, the other companies I represent, I tone down what they say things will do.
Yeah.
By 30%, usually. In other words, if the wood manufacturer says, oh, if you use our gasification boiler, you're going to use 70% less wood, I tell them 30 to 40, because I don't want to overstate a product.
So you feel that in general, the wind turbine companies tend to elevate and go to the high end when there's a range of...
No, I think if you, again, I think if you have that wind speed, you'll get that production. But to get that, not annual, but even a monthly average at that wind speed, that's what's going to tell you whether it's working right or not.
No, then you need 24-mile-an-hour wind
I think you'll get the electricity that they say you will. It's you know, are you in a rainy month or not? Are you in a windy month? You know, is the annual average going to work out to where everybody's happy? It's really hard to tell. Like I was kind of kidding about my site, you know, October, it's been probably one of the nicest Octobers I can remember, and I swear, it's just, it hasn't been great for producing wind, and October's supposed to be one of the good months. You know, so hopefully, you know, after a couple of years of seeing these cycles and dips and valleys, things will look a lot clearer. And we can't look at the meter every day. It's kind of like your stocks. Can't look at them every day. Yeah. Both these units are very low maintenance. Usually you just do a visual inspection, whether it's the guy wires, the blades themselves, and then electrically you can test the motor windings or the generator windings from the base, but you know, it's very minimal maintenance. That's the way they're designed. The bearings in them are designed for over 20 years. Probably, you know, if you had one up on top of Mount Washington, you might want to change those bearings after 10 or 12, but you know, for most of us, the bearings are the rotating part. That's what's going to fail mechanically. Electronically, you know, I don't have a crystal ball with that stuff. Hopefully they'll get longevity out of that equipment also, 15 or 20 years. I know other appliances that use electronics last that long. Hopefully, you know, they've designed everything right, and those components will last that long too.
Is an inverter an inverter an inverter? In other words, if you've got an inverter for solar or wind,
they are the same.
they're the same?
Yeah. Go ahead.
You mentioned First Look as the site you use
Mhm.
for solar radiance. Are you familiar with the NASA site? And if so, why do you choose First Look as opposed to what NASA?
Which site? The national site? No, I am not familiar with NASA.
Doesn't NREL also do,
No. Thanks.
have a wind chart, or is that the same as your first look? National Renewable Energy Lab?
They do, but it's very general. It's a topographical map of the whole state.
I see. So these are more accurate, is what you're saying?
At least locating them. I'm not sure is NASA the same way with the GPS coordinates?
Yes.
Now, have you ever heard of an NREL program where it's basically they lend anemometers?
No.
No?
That'd be
You might want
good.
to check that out. I know that, I don't know a lot about it, but I know there is one. We have a certain number of anemometers they lend out on a yearly basis.
Nice, that would be good.
And they're in Colorado, right? So,
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Harold?
Could you repeat the cost for the 1K?
The 1.8 kW SkyStream, you know, depending on the tower, a 30-foot tower probably run around 16,000, 17,000. And then, you know, with each increment up with towers, the 40-foots are, you can probably add another 4,000 to that, 3,000 or 4,000. And then when you get up to 80 feet, it's almost 10,000 more. So around 26,000.
a lot of it varies by the length, again, that you have to run that wire from the nacelle through your meter. The placement is a big factor.
I mean, it really, it's one of the components, but it's no more, I guess, to qualify it. I mean, the price range on the wire could probably run from 300 to 1,000. It's the conduit, the excavation, that whole part of it, you know, gets more as you go further away. So it does add to the cost, like she's saying. But the actual wire itself, it's part of the job.
It's part of the job, absolutely, but the electrical part for the wire and the conduit shocked the homeowner. She didn't realize that it was almost the price of the turbine itself.
But yeah, like I'm saying, the turbine itself is $6,000 for a SkyStream, and a tower for it can cost 10. You know, the foundation's another 3 or 4. You know, They're significant structures, especially when you get them up bigger. It takes a lot of cement to hold those to the ground. And the difference, you know, between like the Berge and the Skystream is the Skystream nacelle and blades were 150 or 160 pounds, and the Berge's 1,200. So there's quite a bit more hold down force required. But they both work by the same principles as far as the structural engineering part of it. Did I answer your question about the cost? Okay.
Give me the wrong word, yeah. Give me wrong. I want to talk to you more about that.
Yeah. You know, I think a lot of people, homeowners, at least, it's a little bit over their head, but certainly contractors and mechanically inclined people who aren't afraid to undertake different things, it's certainly within the realm of a do-it-yourself type project. Obviously, you get into a Berge with a 100-foot tower, it's a little bit different, but it's still, with some technical guidance, it certainly is something a lot of people could do themselves.
Do you have a website?
I do, dnlenergy.com.
You want to use the cards?
Yeah, I got some cards. Here.
We really appreciate your coming.
No problem. My pleasure.
We're
Here.
hoping to.
You guys want one? Help yourself.
Down the road, right now we have a solar hot water and a solar photovoltaic and solar schools. And down the road, we'd like to run a wind class.
And supplement
Just
on its own?
a wind class, yeah, for, well, it will be offered to our students here, but also a lot of these classes, turns out, are you know, people who want to either want to do it as a homeowner, you know, it's not very
Yeah.
focused, is it? But
I wasn't looking at it.
or want to get into the business of doing it. And so our feeling is that we just want people to go into these things with you know, an open eyes, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll take one too, please.
Did you say 1 kilowatt installation price?
Which one?
The 1 kilowatt?
1.8? It's the Skystream? It could range from like.
Where do you have it? Where you got a 1?
Now you got me confused. Now, go ahead. Which one's he asking?
He was asking a Berge.
I do this with my wife all the time. What's he saying?
I've never seen it before in my life.
Collective hearing, right?
No, I got my hearing aids in.
10 kilowatt and a 1 kilowatt.
Yeah. The 10 kW, how much are those installed?
Yeah.
You know, 55 to 65, depending on the tower. They can go as high as 80.
And what about the 1? Small one?
15 to 27.
Okay.
Let me throw this in here.
Good, thank you.
That's yours too.